Hello, I'm Dan Doolan,
I'm Chris Billingham.
and join us for what very well may be the final time as we venture into the unknown and over-analyse the Garden Wall. It's very exciting. We're here.
Boom.
Final episode titled The Unknown. Final chapter, I should say. Yeah.
You prepped?
I'm prepped? Yes, Chris. To the point where
man.
last night and throughout the week I've done research, and I added up the amount of time I've spent doing research, and it won't be worth it, I promise. But I think I've done about 4 or 5 hours worth of research over the course of the week.
Wow. I did like 20 minutes.
So what I've done...
I watched a YouTube video. I watched Tune of the Tune over the Garden of the Unknown, or whatever it's called.
Tome of the
I
Unknown.
saw that. Yeah, Tome of the Unknown. I watched that.
I've not seen that in years. You can actually give us a small little review of that if you want afterwards.
Yeah.
But basically, what I did was I went through a bunch of like explanations and fact videos and stuff, and made notes of like, I did a bunch of like Googling as well to verify some of these stories, and I've got a mixture for towards the end of the podcast of little facts, so little tiny little morsels of triv, a bunch of unused ideas for episodes and like the ending and things like that. I've got some.
Oh, wow.
I've got some stuff from the creator, what he said about what it might mean. Bit waffly his answer, but fucking rich coming from me. I've got
Christ, between the two of you, we'll be here for days.
yeah, and I've done like little hints, other bits of triv. Just it's a collection of different kinds of triv. Some of them is other people's theories. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. You guys should know from the title whether that's this week or next. I mean, it sounds like it might be next, but we shall see how we go.
Yeah, we'll just crack on. I mean, I keep thinking about it and going like, I don't mind if the episode's 2 hours. I mean, it's the final. Like, so part of me is just thinking it's neat to do it as 10, but I understand. We'll see how it goes. We'll base it on the actual conversation.
I reckon hour 45 bumper ep. You guys, we know you guys are looking forward to getting to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, so
But
you don't want to delay that by a week.
Yeah, which I keep thinking we need to rename it, because we can't unrelated. So we'll get back to Of the Garden Wall. We've talked about that in the past, doing Honey, I Shrunk the Kids reviews for this channel, because it was just a weird idea we once had. But I think we need to call it Honey, I Shrunk NBS.
Yeah,
because we can't call it Honey, I Shrunk Steven University, because it'll have nothing to do with Steven Universe, and I feel that will cause confusion. But anyway.
Yeah, I think... but can I ask one logistical question on that?
Yeah.
Are you going to watch some episodes in and around the other movies so that you've got more chance of seeing a fair amount? Or are you going to do it in chronological order of which we're reviewing it? I think, so watch the movie, record. I think I'll at
least watch the first movie before I start watching episodes of the show. But yeah.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're watching the first movie tomorrow, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's very exciting. When are we recording? We're recording Tuesday, right?
Yeah. To the point where someone said, "What are you up to at the weekend?" And I said,
"This should be
a podcast."
Why is this on the podcast?
Don't worry about it. I said I'm doing a podcast. I'm watching Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and they were like, "Why is that your weekend?" I was like, "We're doing a podcast on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids," and they were like, "Is there demand for that?" I was like, "No, not really. It's just a joke that we've taken too far."
It is a joke that we've taken too far. Speaking of us taking things too far, let's get to the actual. Let's get to the meat and potatoes.
I think we've had far worse tangents at the beginning of stuff than a 4-minute thing related to what we were going to release after this episode.
I know, but this is the fun. People are excited.
Chill.
They turned it on. What are we doing?
Chill.
What are we
your
doing?
beans, Dan.
Right. The unknown.
Calm down.
So the vague sort of description of the events of that episode, the recap, as some have called it. We open with... Actually, do we open with Greg? I don't even remember.
No, we open with Beatrice herself.
Oh, that's right. She gets blown down. Like she thinks she sees people, then she sort of gets blown out of the air with the snowstorm. She ends up with Wirt and basically tells him they know where Greg is. where she might know where Greg is. She saw him with someone. She's not going home until she saves him, which immediately snaps Wirt into, okay, fine, because he's not ready to have a conversation with her about anything, because he's just like, no, Greg's in trouble. We're just going then. That's fine.
No, the very beginning is Greg doing his tasks for the Beast.
Yeah, that's
and then
exactly what I was about to say.
No, but that comes before what you're saying, doesn't it?
Yeah, well,
And
obviously
then-
these two things are intercut, Chris, but I obviously described the whole section, and I was going to go back. Just saying. Let me do my recapping, Chris. What are you doing to me?
Sorry.
Talk about
Carry on. I think
interrupting the flow.
You were chatting about Patrice, weren't you? I love that people call you out in the comments for that before I then call you out on the episode. Love it.
Yeah. Well, I know, if you actually remember rightly, I call myself out and then you jump on it like a cat waiting to pounce. It's horrendous. So we get the Beast. He is basically giving Greg task after task that seem impossible, but Greg, being a sort of innovative child, is not at all being deterred by these ridiculously impossible tasks. So there's a point where the Beast sort of accepts that he's never going to give up and just says, that's right, keep trying. Essentially hinting that the coal will get him eventually. And that's a reference to an earlier episode where the woodsman actually said that you'll either get your spirit or you'll get ill. And basically the Beast has decided that instead of taking Greg's sort of spirit and making him give up, he's instead just going to keep him out in the cold until he gets sick, which will allow him to turn him into a tree. The woodsman himself is, back at the old grist mill looking for some edelwood. When he hears the Beast's song in the distance, he runs out and finds the Beast with Greg. They get into a dispute and it becomes a bit of a fight, and they head off. And at that point, the light from the lantern, which is dropped, leads both Wirt and Beatrice to the site where Greg is. They see that Greg's half tree now, which is not a good look on him. One of my favorite jokes of the episode is he coughs up some leaves, and she's like, "Oh no, they're even growing inside him," and he's just like, "No, I'm eating leaves," which is a great little gag.
It's a great joke.
Also a reference to a previous episode because he was eating leaves in Lullabies to Frogland. So it's a nice little callback as well. The Beast and the Woodsman return, and the Beast basically offers Wirt the chance to save his brother by putting his soul in the lantern and then becoming the lantern bearer. And for a brief second, Wirt's like, okay. And then he goes, wait, no, that's dumb. And realizes essentially the truth of the situation, which is that the Beast basically is the only one who seems to care about whether this lantern is lit. And that doesn't make any sense. Why does the Beast care about this lantern? And then he goes, it's almost like your soul is in here. And then he plucks up his courage to test this theory, goes to blow it out. And then the Beast sort of reacts like, no! And like, Wirt immediately knows he's right, and that actually the Beast has almost no power at all because anybody at any moment could blow out the lantern. And then he hands it in a really badass moment to the Woodsman and is like, I'm not dealing with this. This is your problem. And then he basically takes Greg and he's like, we're going home. But before he does that, he does give Beatrice the scissors.
Who?
Beatrice.
I thought she was called Patrice.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's literally one of my favourite bits of this podcast.
I know.
So,
can you wait till after I've stumbled my way through the the intro to make fun of me for that, please?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, he stumbles across Patrice.
Yeah, Beatrice. Yeah. The only good thing that's come out of this is that I now call her the correct name all the time, which is good.
It's everyone's got to learn how to do that at some point.
Uh-huh.
You just did your learning to say Beatrice publicly. So
yes, correct. So Wirt gives her the scissors. They have a nice moment between each other, and then he goes home, and they wake up in the river they fell in the moment from after the train. They're found by their friends crawling out as Wirt saves Greg. They're taken in an ambulance. They go back to the hospital where Wirt finds out that Greg is fine, and then has this moment of bravery where he tells Sarah they can listen to it together, the tape, at his own house. And everyone is satisfied with that ending, as the narrator then points out, and we then get a final version of the song Into the Unknown with some shots that give us some closure for some of the characters. The most obviously important one, the one that gets dialogue, is Beatrice getting her family back, but also the woodsman returning home finally, and his daughter was waiting for him. Well, I'll get to that at a later on in this discussion, but yeah, we finally end on the frog that attained the name Jason Funderburker, and was finally decided this episode, and he's singing, singing about mysterious stuff. Chris, what did we think? How do we feel?
I feel good, man. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very neat yet wonderfully open-ended ending. I think there's lots to unpack. It's funny you say about the woodsman. That was sort of my immediate thing.
We'll get to that in a second. Then we'll make that a priority.
Yeah. I love that, there's hints that it wasn't real, yet it very much seems to be a shared experience between the two of them. And obviously the bell is still in Jason Funderburker the frog.
Which, I mean, that to me is the most clear evidence of whatever they went through not just being in their minds.
Yeah. It being a real thing, which is cool. Thoroughly enjoyed myself, Dan.
Good.
I thought it was a wonderful, piece of 10-episode television.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, let's actually start with the big question. I mean, in terms of satisfaction, obviously at the beginning, you were sort of, and I tried to curb this because I tried to sort of manage the expectations a little bit as the season went on. You probably noticed, because right at the beginning you were like, I just can't wait to get answers. That's the sort of the stuff you were saying early on, because I think you assumed that the reason I was showing you this is because it's this great mystery that's got a full, detailed explanation. And I
think I just assumed it was great, and it would have to, if they left loads of shit unanswered, frustratingly, you and everyone else wouldn't think it was great.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough. All right, that makes sense. So yeah, there was a point at about episode 4 or 5 when you were starting to ask questions about when they're going to get to explaining stuff, because you were sort of seeing the clock ticking away, and then I think you just were on board for the ride. Do you think? I mean, do you think they is this a they got away with it, or is this a they nailed it situation in terms of the level of information?
I think they nailed it, because I don't think everything, as we've discussed on here before, and countless other times with things like Lost and The Leftovers, I don't think necessarily everything has to be answered for things to be satisfying. The reality is that as long as you don't leave things unanswerable, it's usually a satisfying experience, and the theorizing and stuff is wonderful, and I think it's some great character arc stuff. I think it's funny because we kind of got, and I saw a behind the scenes clip which indicated that it aired over 5 nights or 5 weeks or something, sort of implying that it aired in twos.
Yes.
And I think if that's the case, then especially if you view those final 2 parts together, such a wonderful finale. I think there was more character stuff last week than there is this week. Obviously, we got the apology from Wirt to Greg, but we saw him learn and want to apologise last week. So, I don't... all that character work that we praised last week still stands, basically, and this is it's all about payoff and plot this week. I thought it was wonderful.
I did think about that when we were initially planning this. I did think about maybe us doing the final 2 together, because I remembered, and I hadn't really watched them at that point, but I remembered distinctly feeling like the final 2 was sort of one in the same.
Yeah, very much, because they're the only 2, if you think about it, that really directly... It's a part 1 and a part 2 more than any other episodes of this show. Everything
100%.
Else has a kind of A, B, and C, whereas the A, B, and C here is stretched across the 2.
Yeah. But that was actually one of my pieces of trivia for later on. But yeah, it was broadcast over a single week. 2 episodes a night, Monday to Friday. And I think that's a great way to do it. if I'm being honest with you. I think you're right about like this episode on its own. You could judge if you wanted and be like, oh, it's a little imbalanced. That, you know, they fight the beast and then it's like, here's the solution to the character stuff, but it's like, where's the character stuff? Someone could argue that, but I think you've nailed it, which is that really this, I think, is most fairly judged as a two-parter, as a 20-minute finale. And I think if you do it that way, it's perfectly balanced. These two work brilliantly off each other. If you watch it as a whole, it's this great 20-minute thing that sets up the character arc of why they're there, the kind of tragedy of the situation. Particularly, you get that from the first part for Wirt. You realise that everything's his own fault, and he's just he can't get out of his own way, and he doesn't realise it, and he's blaming his brother. And then to have that moment in this episode where he realises that it is all his fault, and that he's dragged his brother into this really bad situation, and is to the point he's even convinced his brother that he's responsible. The rock facts thing, we'll get to that in a bit, but he's even sort of convinced Greg he's at fault. And it's kind of tragic to see. As sad as it was to see Wirt sort of, lying on the ground, defeated, a loss of hope. That was tragic. To me, it was infinitely more tragic to see Greg putting himself through that, because I think that with Greg, he was a victim of Wirt's social anxieties and anxieties generally. And I think that's really unfortunate and strange. Like, I think that's, and I think that's kind of brilliant, but that only really works properly as a two-parter. That functions together. So I think you really hit the nail on the head with that, which if judging this episode on its own, someone could definitely argue that it's like, it's maybe too much meat and no potatoes or whatever. I don't know. Whatever we chose for those two things. It depends on your preference,
because I love the plot stuff. So I think I just think it's best you get both probably from viewing those last two as two-parters.
Yeah, exactly. To create proper balance, you have to watch them. You should watch them together, I think. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. So should we talk about the Woodsman?
Yeah, I think that was the one you kind of like. The one area where I was like, I need some clarification on that.
I've got some ideas, but I'll let you to say what you think might have what happened, or ask the questions that you've got.
No, I don't really like other stuff. I've got a kind of this, and this. But with that one, it's kind of like, so she, if she, I don't believe her soul was in the lantern yet. When the beast is destroyed and the lantern is broke, she's suddenly back. So was she being captured somewhere, and the beast being destroyed broke that capture or broke that spell? But then the beast, really, in reality, as you say, doesn't have much power. He gets other people to do stuff for him, because he seemingly can't touch anything.
Yes.
Which we can theorize from the fact that he doesn't carry the fucking lantern, and actually when the Woodsman and Wirt threaten the lantern, he gets all big and stuff, but he doesn't actually fundamentally grab them, touch them, or anything like that.
Yes.
So, yeah, where she was is intriguing to me. But from what you said earlier, is the indication that he's not gone home.
I mean, that is exactly what I'm about to get to. Yeah, that is basically it. He's been completely tricked, and that's the real tragedy. The Beast actually says to him in this episode, "Are you really ready to go back to that empty house?" So he's been at the old grist mill. Right. Which was actually another pivotal part of this, the tapestry of this world. We'll come back to the old grist mill in a bit, because that's actually related very heavily to Beatrice's story. But are you really ready to go back to that empty house suggests that basically what may have happened is that she's gone into the woods. In a panic, he's gone out in after her, but instead of bumping into her, he's bumped into the Beast, who has told him that he's taken his daughter. But in reality, right, as we've just established, he has absolutely no power in this world other than being scary looking, and needing the trees ground up of the souls of those who have lost hope to keep himself alive. So he's basically tricked the Woodsman into being the lantern bearer to keep himself alive by claiming that he's now, if he was to go home, it would be to an empty house because his daughter is long gone, and that's the real tragedy of it, because he's clearly been doing this for years. Literally, the Beast says that you've been doing this for years, which also, by the way, is an indication to me that the people in this world don't age. They stay whatever age they are, because his daughter is obviously still his daughter by the end of the episode. She's not she's not grown into a lot young. Well, no, because obviously the intro to the show shows the woodsman and the daughter when they were together, and they're the same age. We'll get that's another thing we'll get to a little bit later, but I think that cabin is his home, and he after defeating the Beast, presumably, and finally going back there. The real tragedy of the woodsman's story is that it was all absolutely for nothing, and he gets home and she was just there waiting for him the whole time, which means the whole time he was gone, she wasn't the one that was kidnapped. He was, and he could have chosen to go back to her at any point, but didn't know.
Wow,
and that is brilliant. I think that's so clever, and all of that can only be inferred with that one sentence of, "Are you really ready to go back to that empty house from the Beast?" And I think that's just such incredible writing. He is one of the most tragic figures in this entire show. Like, it's heartbreaking to think that this daughter he was basically tricked into chopping up trees made of people, essentially, which morally, obviously, he feels very awful about. And like when he finally, and it's worth noting that they very clearly establish in this episode as well, he didn't know that's what was happening.
No,
he thought they were just normal trees. He reacts very strongly when he realizes the Beast is turning lost souls into these trees, and those are the exact words we used, by the way, lost souls, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, I think that the woodsman's story, and I felt like you the first time. I was like, what? Because he defeated the Beast, the souls that he ate up returned? Question mark. Like, that was how I felt the very first time I watched it. But watching it, I think the second time, because I watched the whole show before we started doing this, top to bottom, just so I knew where I was.
Remembered, yeah.
Yeah. I put it together a bit more clearly there and then, and again, it's an incredible sequence of events. Some people, and that's the great thing about the show, some people may totally disagree with that interpretation of what's happened, but he sat on the porch, she comes out from inside the house. It's not like she wanders out from the woods. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's been waiting, and they clearly set up he hasn't been home in a while. So I think that's the situation.
Yeah, and she clearly reacts to him like,
yeah, she's surprised to see him, which means she's been waiting alone for a long time. And again, even that's tragic too.
Yeah. Like you say, the notion that he thinks she's kidnapped and she thinks he's kidnapped.
Yeah, incredible.
Wow.
And I do appreciate as well that where this story goes, that gives Wirt such confidence, like to the point where he hands the Beast's lantern to the woodsman. And very specifically is like, you deal with this. Because I think he knows a lot as well. I think he knows that he's not the one that's been tormented by the Beast for as long. That's the woodsman is the one whose life's been ruined by this Beast. So
Did he say something like, I've got my own problems, this is yours, or something?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a really... I've not got the line in front of me, I can bring it up, but like, it is a totally badass line. Like, it's such a badass piece of dialogue. Let me see if I can find it.
Do you wish that there was some sort of...
I've got my own problems to take care of. This one's yours.
Do you think... But I don't think he means it in, like, you deal with this. He means it in you have the power and the knowledge now. Do with it what you will.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. He's but it's such a powerful moment. It's such an important moment. It's, in a weird way, a lot of this story is about coming of age, and I almost feel like that moment... No, that's dumb. I'm not going to do that. We're not going to run away from these problems anymore. I think that is really an allegory for this journey in general. I think that a lot of this journey is about growing up and about becoming a functional adult and like learning to take responsibility for your choices and your actions and learning to make decisions for yourself and not just go along with stuff. And I think I think Wirt handing that lantern off after realizing is a really great moment, and credit to Elijah Wood. We don't compliment the cast enough here, but there's a moment when he's not as sure of his theory, and his voice sort of breaks. I can't remember on what line it is, but there's a voice. He almost says it twice, and There you go. He goes, "Are you?" And his voice cracks, and he clears his throat, and then he goes, "Are you?" Because that's it. The beast says, "Are you ready to see true darkness?" He's trying to scare Wirt into going along with it, and Wirt's like, "Are you?" Are you? Like, and it's this. I'm not doing it justice. Obviously, it's an incredible performance from Elijah Wood, but it's this moment where he goes from being unsure of himself, and his voice is cracking, and he's not sure what he's saying. Are you? Where then he gains confidence in himself, and he goes, "No, are you?" Like, and realizes what's actually, what's happening, and then he goes to blow out the lantern, and the beast says, "Don't," and that's that's the moment. So yeah, I think that's. What did you think of the beast?
What did you think of the beast's true form that we obviously get a fleeting glimpse of?
Well,
and it's so fleeting. I tried to pause that so much, and in the end, I just Googled it.
Yeah, I mean, I can say I did a screenshot. I frame by framed it until I got the perfect shot where he's perfectly lit. Do you want me to send it to you, or have you seen enough of it that you know?
No. I Google. Yeah, I Googled it.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's pretty horrendous. It's horrific. It's like his body is made up of faces and eyes and like skulls almost. He's not an attractive man. I'm not trying to be judgy, Chris, but he's a horrific creature. But he's designed specifically to access a certain fear, like a known fear. Have you ever heard of trypophobia?
No.
So trypophobia is a fear of things with holes in.
Right.
But it's a real. People who have this fear are horrified.
Right.
That idea, it makes them physically want to vomit. They react really strongly to it, and he's just full of holes, isn't he? He's a holy man.
Yeah.
Holy in the sense of he's full of holes, not holy in the sense of religious.
Do you think those faces and stuff? No, they can't really represent the victims, can they? Do you think, or because the color of it is slightly, elderwoody, the color of him.
I mean, I guess if he's fueled by trees that are grown up of people, yeah. I mean, I suppose maybe.
But the only thing I don't like about that though is the implication. And I suppose it could be true, but I prefer him to be a trickster, as opposed to the implication that the more souls that are destroyed, the more wood that the more oil that burns for the beast, the stronger the beast becomes.
I don't think it's about making him stronger, more about keeping him alive. I think he's a creature maybe made up of that stuff, and it's more it's more what keeps him alive at all.
Right, yeah.
Which is a really interesting dynamic, because essentially to the beast who is made of darkness and can control darkness, and there's a point in the episode where he surrounds Wirt in utter darkness. The idea that to beat him, you have to blow out the lantern. So the only way to beat him is to be brave in a way that most people probably would never be.
What if there's a little bit of a crossover, Dan, and he's Voldemort in the forest when he goes off as his half in Albania. Man, half the Albanian forest.
Yeah, it could be, Chris. Could be.
I mean, it seems unlikely. But,
yeah, it does. I do like that he's a trickster.
And you never know though. JK might retcon it into existence.
I hate when people make that joke. It's the dumbest joke.
I know.
It doesn't make any sense. She's literally changed two. She's changed two things. One of which she had the right to do. It was in a prequel film, and the other one she was directly asked and she gave her opinion. I don't understand. That joke makes no sense to me. Why that's become a meme that she just keeps going back in and retconning things makes no sense to me. Absolutely none whatsoever. And if anyone's about to say, but Hermione, she didn't know the show was separate. They happened to cast somebody of a different ethnicity, and she said,
that's ridiculous. Yeah.
She said, that's fine. I think that's great. I never specified an ethnicity. What she wasn't saying was, oh, in my head she was always. No, she was simply saying, I know. You know what? This is a whole can of worms we've opened. I'm not doing it. But yeah, that situation really pisses me off. That's become a running.
Sounds a little bit like you're doing it, Dan.
Anyway, no, I'm moving on.
It feels a little bit like I've now got two strings to my bow. I've got Beatrice. And I've got JK retcons. I think people were upset at the idea of wizards shitting in the Great Hall, but that's not retconning. That's just...
Yeah. It's not retcon. It doesn't change anything from the books, so shush. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, really cool actually. A little note on the point of keeping the beast alive. At the beginning of this episode, when the woodsman is in the old grist mill, he finds those two sort of snapped twigs of edelwood, and he starts grinding them up in the machine, which I presume is why he hangs around the grist mill. The grist mill has a machine that he can use to get the oil out of the wood, get the oil out of the wood. But those two sticks of edelwood he finds underneath like a cabinet, you actually see those two get broken and thrown under there in episode 1.
By who?
I think Greg.
Oh, cool.
I didn't have the shot in front of me, but there was a YouTube video I saw that had both clips lined up, and I can't 100% remember. I saw so many videos prepping for this, so ridiculous. Like, there are so many videos online going through the over the garden wall in detail.
But what did you think of all the Dante's Inferno hell stuff then that's out there? I mean, this really will be one bumper episode because we're now talking much bigger, but...
So we're dipping into some of the stuff I've got on that. But I think that's great. I mean, for those who don't know, Beatrice is the name of one of the characters in Dante's Inferno, and specifically that's a character who leads... No. Let me get through this episode in peace. It's the last one, Chris. Stop tormenting me. It's not fair. I did it like a couple of times.
Oh, you mean Patrice? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
It's not funny anymore.
Genuinely confusing. Sorry, mate.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you say Patrice?
Yeah, Beatrice is named after Beatrice from Dante's Inferno. Dante's not Dante's Inferno. Dante's Divine Comedy. A character who literally leads Dante from purgatory to heaven in arguably the same way that Beatrice leads Wirt through the unknown. I think it's a very intentional reference on the show's part. I think the idea is very heavily to hint that there is an element of afterlife and purgatory to the unknown. You know, where you land on that is a very different matter, but it's certainly a reference.
I think reference and, nod as opposed to outright hell, personally. I think that there's no denying it. Personally, there's no denying it's, intentional and it is, like I say, a reference, but I don't feel like it means the unknown is categorically hell.
Yeah, I don't think the unknown is hell either. I guess one of the things we'll do at the end of this is we'll have a look at we'll maybe give our own theories as to what's actually going on. Or we could do that now, I suppose. I don't know why I'm. Why would I say we'll do that later when we're talking about it?
Yeah, I don't think this can be in any order because it's all so.
Yeah, it's also tied to what's going on.
Discuss the episode without tied. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless we're like, I really like that scene.
And also, it prevents me from doing what I was scared this would end up being, which is that the last hour would be just me listing references to stuff and you going, cool,
exactly.
I think. Go on.
I think it's I think to be fair, I did watch a YouTube video which kind of echoed this. Which was, I think, YouTube Explainer. And they were kind of talking about how the unknown is a place kind of accessed through imagination, a place that exists but is it's not necessarily an afterlife, but it is where consciousness can go. And the consciousness of Quincy is there, and the potentially it's so expansive that the multiple consciousness. I think it happened. I don't think it was in one of their heads because it's a shared experience, and we see the frog with the bell.
Yes.
But I think it is. And it's definitely accessed when, in a heightened state such as near death. I think it's... Excuse me. I think what's interesting is, I don't know if the implication there is that all of Beatrice's family jumped out the way of a train and fell in a lake or went through something similar, and the woodsman and the daughter, that's hard to tell and hard to know. But I think it really happened, and I think it was a place where the consciousness can go.
Yeah. I sort of agree. I think it's complicated because what throws me off that theory, because I like that theory a lot, and I remember reading some theories like that at the time as well, where it's sort of like it's a plane of existence that you go when, conscious, where you go, where you could either meditate your way there, you could either sort of have like a trauma like that where it knocks you unconscious, you could probably visit there if you were in a coma. There are many ways you could theoretically breach the unknown. So therefore, you could argue that all of the characters in the show are people who are going through their own stories, where they're in their real lives, they're either in a coma or they've had some other sort of trauma or a drowning like the boys or whatever. The problem I have with that, and the reason I don't think that quite fits, is that the boys are the only ones seeming to try and get out. Everyone else seems to live there. And I think it doesn't really fit, because I think everyone else that's there should be trying to... It feels like everyone else is a resident, basically, and I feel like that doesn't really fit. So my sort of explanation is somewhat close to that, because I think as well with that theory, what I love mostly about that theory is it sort of explains why everyone is from different time periods, because we haven't really talked about this. But Beatrice's dress sense and hairstyle suggests she's from the Regency era, which is like 1795 to 1837. Miss Langtry's hair implies she's from 1890s Victorian sort of era. Like, there's loads of people from different time frames, and I think that because of that, I like the idea that time doesn't really exist in the unknown in the same way, so they're all from different times, all having those experiences. That sort of fits to me. But the idea that the only two people seeming to be traveling through it to an end point, to an escape, to returning to Earth, are the two boys. So for me, I think it's actually probably more likely something to do with I think it's our version of purgatory. I don't think it's purgatory as we know it. I think it is when you're teetering between life and death. I think most times, 9 times out of 10, you end up like if you've had a horrible accident, or you've been poisoned or whatever. That moment when you're teetering between life and death, I think I like to think as an explanation for the show that what's actually happening is that all these people are teetering between life and death, but the people who have made residency there are the ones that are not getting out, the ones that have had a more serious incident happen to them, something they're not likely to be able to escape from. And I think, obviously, Wirt and Greg only being in the water, drowning is an option, so they're there, but it's not as likely to kill them as what some of the other characters may have been through.
Could you make an argument that the reason Greg and Wirt are trying to get through is because they're lost souls, in their kind of own ways, I guess, and that maybe everyone else's consciousness they're hanging around because they're not lost because they've come to the end of their life, or they're accepting that they're going to die or something. Because I know some of them are young, but in the time periods they're placed in, they're not young enough to. Do you see what I mean? Like, they are at an age where they would potentially accept death more, because it's not like they're children from the modern era who would potentially expect to grow to be 80 years old. I don't know.
I think that's a part of it. I do think it is I do think it's heavily to do with death. I don't think it's it's unintentional. Yeah. I think it is a form of purgatory. I don't think it's purgatory as we know it, though. I don't think but I think that's the word that fits the most. If you'd like, I can read you when someone asked the creator a question specifically regarding that and his answer.
Please do.
So the question asker says, so I interpret the series is that the unknown is where your soul goes when you're between life and death. So it's not a metaphor, it's a real place, because Jason, the Thunderbird of the Frog, brought back the magical bell he swallowed. And we see that the characters from the unknown continue to exist after the boys wake up. Have you heard any other theories like this? Or how do what or would you like to settle once and for all what actually happened? So, Pat McHale, his response: your interpretation makes sense to me, but maybe it's not about life and death. Maybe it's about reality versus fantasy, about dreams versus wakefulness. The unknown is literally unknown. There are stories that were once told and are gone forever. words that have been spoken and forgotten, ideas that have been thought but lost. There's plenty of stuff mankind has never thought of and will never think of. The unknown is all that stuff. Is there more to the universe than what humans can perceive? And then maybe everything that can be conceived is floating around somewhere unseen and unknown in an abstract way. So maybe Wirt and Greg get a glimpse of it, which makes sense of these abstract concepts the best way they can understand it, which is goofy cartoon stories. Or maybe Wirt and Greg and everyone else in the show are just some made-up characters used to express some ideas that would have otherwise disappeared. Maybe everything on TV is a lie. Maybe all of your memories are lies. Maybe everything you perceive is a lie. But you have to believe in something, right? Wow, that is.
Wow, Jesus. He's been taken. He's like a wanky Kevin Feige. He didn't actually answer anything in the way that Kevin Feige doesn't. Could I just say I would, just because I gotta get this out because it's just happened. I'm sure we'll talk about it on Nothing But Static. But don't you just love that? Clearly, Disney, Sony, anyone else connected doesn't play Kevin Feige's game. Kevin Feige the other week, it was like asked if they were going to Comic-Con, and he apparently answered, even confirming or denying whether we're going to be at Comic-Con is a spoiler for Avengers Endgame. And then Disney Plus is just like, Falcon and Winter Soldier series, Loki series, like Hawkeye series. It's like, oh really? But whether you're going to Comic-Con is a spoiler, but the fact that all these fuckers have TV shows isn't cool.
Yeah, well, they didn't actually announce the Hawkeye one. That's a rumor. They didn't announce that at the Disney Plus at all. It's interesting. Anyway,
no, but they have announced a logo for two characters who are spoilers meant to be.
Yeah, 100%.
Snapped.
Yeah, 100%. So in terms of Pat McHale's answer, I think he's essentially saying there it could be, let it be whatever you want it to be imagination-wise. For me, there are too many references to death and afterlife. I do think it is some sort of between life and death world, or maybe even it is just the afterlife. That is just what happens when you die. You go into that space, and that's why all those people are there. It's not a coincidence that Quincy Endicott's name is on that gravestone.
No, but I think if it's directly the afterlife, it would have been trickier almost for them to get out of it.
Not if you're just sort of like passing through, if you're sort of near death. Like, maybe that's the difference between the boys passing through and all the other people who appear to be residents. They can't choose to go home. They've died. The boys are near death, so they are passing through. They're travellers. They're getting a glimpse of it.
Or they've chosen to, it's that really kind of
yes, that
beautiful line from Nicholas, Nearly Headless Nick in Harry Potter.
Yes,
where he says something. Harry goes to find him after Sirius, and he basically indicates that the brave people move on, and actually choosing to become a ghost is isn't. I can't remember what he says, but it's beautiful. Maybe these people have chosen to live in purgatory, like Nearly Headless Nick essentially did. Yeah, no,
that was part of sort of the theory I initially conceived about it as well, was the idea that there's a choice to be had. There's a choice. You get to this place, the unknown, and you can either you go on and then it's heaven, hell, or whatever you want to, whatever kind of afterlife you want to imagine, or you could choose to go. You can choose to go back almost if you're in a nod, unless your death was very final, you can your spirit, your soul, whatever, can choose to go back, which is why Wirt and Greg are referred to as lost souls. They've not decided to stay, they've not decided to move on. They're sort of in the middle of that, so they're lost.
But what do you think happens to the people then in that scenario that the beast turns into trees?
I guess their souls are destroyed. They don't get to move on. They don't get to stay in the unknown. It's quite tragic. It's quite dark. It's very dark. But the show is pretty dark. And I think what's interesting as well is there's a shot, I think it's in this episode, of the woodsman having cut down a tree and it's hollow. And the implication of that being that when the beast turns you into a tree, he hollows you out, that's a pretty haunting idea too. Yeah.
What did you think of the montage then?
Well, the montage we'll get to. There's a ton. I've got some stuff from the middle of the episode we should talk about, if that's okay.
Okay.
We'll try to do the rest of the episode in some sort of order. So, did you like the idea of the beast trying to get Greg's hope and then giving up and then just making him too ill.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that is like everything else is very integrated and embedded, and fundamentally with that, it's he's never going to destroy. This isn't a criticism because they embed it well, but he's never going to be able to destroy Greg's spirit, which has been hinted at throughout about, you know, when you give up hope, blah 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 blah. That notion of, you know, give up all hope, you give yourself over to the beast has been truly put into everything.
Yes.
There's an element of, oh yeah, no, but you can also get ill. You can also get a cold. Cool. And maybe that's been embedded more than that one line you referenced earlier, but it almost feels like a, oh shit, he's never going to break Greg's spirit. Oh, right, yeah, he can do it. He can do it if he's ill too. Yep, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, I think I can't remember which episode the quote is from, but the exact quote is, "Fall ill or lose hope, and your life shall pass into his crooked hands." And that's, I think the Woodsman says that, and it's like 3 episodes ago. So they do set it up mid-season. They don't set it up like, you know, this episode or the one just
No,
before
I know,
it.
but there might be other lines that really set it up. I think the Woodsman saying it is slightly problematic but he didn't know. Do you know what I mean? He didn't know they were the trees, but he knew that if you get ill or give up hope, you end up with the beast.
Oh yeah, was it the Woodsman? Maybe it wasn't the Woodsman. I've made a note of that, but maybe I've made that wrong. Let me just go back, because that's a really good point. Let me go back, because I'm wondering now if it's Songs of the Dark Lantern.
The people in the pub or something, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Let me see.
The quote you should be able to find, shouldn't you?
Yeah, for some reason, Control Fing that didn't bring it up, which is annoying. There you go. No, it's the Woodsman. It's in the episode, The Ringing of the Bell. Before they go to Anti-Whispers, they bump into the Woodsman, don't they? And he says, "The beast knows your presence. He's ready to claim you as part of his dark forest, but only if you give up." And then he says, "Keep hearty in both body and spirit, and you shall be safe from him. Fall ill and lose hope, and your life shall pass into his crooked hands. Children, please heed my warning. Beware of the beast." And that's when the beast shows up and says, "Woodsman, we should talk." Although you're right, then that doesn't actually make any sense, because he clearly knows. I think we found a lot.
Or at least knows enough to put it together. He's been doing it for years. Do you know what I mean? God, another child's soul's disappeared. Oh well, at least there's another tree.
Yeah, that's... Claim you as part of his dark forest, but only if you give up. Keep hearty in both body and spirit, and you shall be safe from him. Fall ill or lose hope, and your life shall pass into his crooked hands. Children, please heed my warning, boys. Beware the beast. I mean, that's compared to this week when he was like, "I didn't know." It's like, wait, well, you did. I mean, it's very clear you did. I think we found a small plot hole.
It's a very specific warning, isn't it?
Yeah, he literally says this week, I didn't know this is where the Edelwood trees came from. Would it have mattered? Would you have just let your daughter's spirit burn out forever? Feed the lantern? No. Hold your tongue.
Didn't he say something like she wouldn't have wanted this or something?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, she would not wish this.
Bizarre.
That is bizarre.
Comment below, I guess.
Yeah, those two things don't fit together. That's really annoying. So I think that's a really cool... I think that the idea of that's how he beats Greg, or has to beat Greg, it says a lot more about Greg than anything else, and I really like the implication.
Yeah, and I loved the gag as you referenced earlier. Nope, I'm just eating leaves.
Yeah, which is brilliant, because I think it's Lullabies in Frogland or whatever it is, that episode, when they sort of camp out before Beatrice sneaks to... Sorry, not my mic. Before she sneaks out to Adelaide, shush, they're over a campfire, and Greg is like roasting leaves on the end of a stick the way you'd roast marshmallows, and then he tries to eat them, and it's just sad and grim. But yeah, it's a great little thing. Well, do you think that they forgive, or that Wirt forgives Beatrice too quickly? Some people have said that. I don't agree with that myself, but I was curious what you thought about that, because you had a lot invested in their relationship.
No, I don't think he. I think he. I interpreted it as the realization of how he treated Greg made him realize how he might have been quick to judge Beatrice and not give her a chance. She was very clearly yelling after them, very clearly distressed. She clearly also, don't forget, she's literally just saved his life and put him in the protection of her family. So if she didn't care, she wouldn't have done that. And I feel like when he says to her, thank you, he's thanking her for all she's done. I think they're cool.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think he gets a little bit of shit when she's like, you had the scissors all along, and he's like, well, it's like, well, to be fair, like,
yeah,
they fucking ran away. They ran away thinking it was your fault, and this is the first time he's really had a chance to have a chat. So,
yeah, but I like that they cover it off with him being like, well, I was kind of mad at you, like, because there is a moment when he says go home earlier in the episode, and if she'd have just gone home, then he wasn't going to give them to her.
Oh, right, yeah, fair point.
There's the early part of the episode where he literally tells her to go home. She's like, not till Greg's safe. It was almost, it wasn't, but it was almost like a test. He was still a bit mad at her, and he was like, no, just go home. I'm done with you. And she's like, no, I'm here to help Greg. And once he knew what her intentions were, they got to the task at hand, but then he gave her back the scissors. Or gave her the scissors, I should say.
Yeah, I don't think he forgave her too quickly at all.
You don't think what, sorry?
I don't think he forgave her too quickly.
No, I don't either. But I've seen that criticism, aimed at it, which is that they never really. Some people have said they never really get a moment to forgive each other. I'm like, yeah, but the way that they come back together is such a fraught moment. It's with the loss of Greg being.
The thank you. There's so much for me in the thank you. I think the thank you is covering that. I think all you Wirt and Patrice haters need to back off. It's my personal opinion.
Yeah. I mean that's fair. Do you think the fact that the Beast describes them as lost souls gives you any other any other clarification on what's really going on, or do you think that's as unknowable as it's probably going to be?
No, I think no more than we've discussed already.
Yeah.
Like they're lost souls between life and death, and Wirt's a lost soul because of his feelings for Sarah. Greg, to some degree, is a lost soul because no matter what he does, he can't gain his brother's approval or affection.
Yeah, and he feels guilty about having stolen the rock fact rock.
Yes,
which I suppose while we're here, we'll talk about. So he's had that all season, knowing that he's felt guilty about that. And that in the previous episode when he was like, and I also got a rock with the face drawn on it, like, from Mrs. Daniels' garden or whatever. The idea that he just took that without permission. And of course, the shot of him taking it is actually in the intro to the show. As is a shot of him returning it, the last shot of the show. And I just think that's a really sweet bookend to his story. I think the Rock Facts Rock is like one of those weird sort of subtle story arcs that actually is more significant than you initially could give it credit for, I think.
It's also funny to me because it adds it's like Greg is such a lovely, positive person that there's no... It's kind of like Wirt's got some emotional shit that he potentially needs to atone for and work out in purgatory, and they've given Greg a crime. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, a crime that he needs to, his guilt, his whether that's a sin. Do you know? It's just interesting that you could argue that element for Greg's character.
Yeah, agreed. Like, I think a lot of kids when they're younger, like, end up sort of taking something that's not theirs when they're very young and then regretting it. I think that's how a lot of people learn that, like. Treat others as you want to be treated. Like you might take something and then you'd feel like, oh, well, actually, no, that person probably feels very bad. They've not got this anymore.
I think in the UK though that happens less since Woolworths no longer exists.
I was thinking more along the lines of I think when I was 5 or something like that, or like 6, I seem to have this weird memory of there being a toy car at one of my friends' houses that I really liked. and like sort of pocketing it and then going back another day and putting it back because I just felt bad about it. Like I took it home, I played it a little bit, and then felt bad about how the whole thing was just associated to like a negative feeling. So I remember like going back the next week to to the friend's house to play again, and then putting it back in his like box of toys or whatever, and it's weird how we learn these lessons when we're young, and I think there's something that struck me about Greg's story because it's rock. Like there's no way she actually cares it's gone, but Greg is so innocent. Do you know what I mean? He returns
he
it.
Really cares.
Yeah.
There's just for clarification, Woolworths was a chain of stores that were famous for having pick and mix. That like I know so many people our age that would steal the pick and mix when they were younger and stuff.
Yeah, no, I definitely think I was part of that as well.
not me. I was too busy stealing hearts.
Hearts and minds.
Yeah, man.
Do you want to hear the lyrics to the Beast's song?
Yeah.
So he sings a song called "Come Wayward Souls," and it literally says, "Come wayward souls that wander through the darkness. There is light for those. There is light for the lost and meek. Sorrow and fear are easily forgotten when you submit to the soil of the earth."
See, there's people that say it's not to do with death. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So he's talking about wayward souls wandering through darkness. He's saying there's light for the lost and the meek. That's obviously referring to the lantern. You can become part of the light, the lantern, the thing that's keeping him alive. Sorrow and fear are easily forgotten when you submit to the soil of the earth, which is essentially saying whatever you're feeling sad or scared about as a lost soul, it'll be easily forgotten if you just submit to becoming a tree, to becoming a good tree, and I can have you chopped down by a person I've tricked and then fed into this lantern here. That's what he's saying. It's quite direct.
It's quite direct and dark, and it's got so many obvious connotations of being buried and like disintegrating into the dirt and stuff like that.
Yeah, agreed. There's another song that's sung. I think was this the one that they're sung when they're coming out? This is one. Did you notice the potatoes and molasses song sung in Latin?
No.
So in the background, when they're first looking for Greg, they hear there's like an angelic song playing under it. But it's O Patatus et Molasses, Si Velis, I can't even pronounce this, Ace Choir Anubis. So it's basically the entire potatoes and molasses song translated into Latin and then sung again underneath the sequence of events. Which
amazing
is just incredible. I don't know, and it is sung by Greg. It's his voice. I don't know. It's really haunting when you hear it in the episode that you don't realize. I would totally understand. So you're not hearing it for what it is, but but when you hear it, knowing that's what it is, you're like, oh my god, it's literally potatoes and molasses, and it's not even that subtle. It's like really out there, but because it's in Latin, I guess, and it feels more like ambient music, and it's building up the tone really well. I guess you're not paying as much attention to its existence, but I thought that was really cool. Maybe just me being a nerd, but I thought that was awesome.
That's awesome.
And actually, one note about the Come Wayward Souls song. It's actually sung to the tune of "Oh Holy Night," which is obviously like a hymn type thing for you religious folk out there.
Yeah. Is it a general hymn or a Christmas hymn specifically?
I've heard it done as a Christmassy one. Which actually makes sense because obviously the seasons shift through the show. When they get there, it's fall, which is the time they left reality. And then by the end of the show, it's clearly winter in the unknown and snowing and very cold. Now, some people have suggested...
Do you think... Yeah, go.
Well, I was going to say there's a theory regarding that. Well, there's a theory, and then we're going to cover two of my notes here. There's a theory, and there's also an original explanation for why that might be. So the original plan, or one of the original ideas, was that when they returned from the unknown, several months would have actually passed in reality, and they'd have been lost that whole time, and they'd have come back, and it would have been Christmas, and everyone would have been like, "Where have you been?" So that's the reason that the season changes, because they were going to come back at Christmas in the real world. So it was going to have gotten cold, and then they'd be back, and it would be Christmas in the real world. They obviously dumped that idea,
but we'll get to that. But yeah.
I wouldn't have liked that either. No, 100%. I think that would have made for more they'd have had more splaining to do, and it wouldn't have got us to the point, which is seeing him talk to Sarah. But anyway, well, that's another moment to talk about in a little bit. But what I think's cool about it is some people have suggested the idea is now that because it gets colder and colder, it's actually hypothermia setting in the real world, which is a really neat idea. And I that's headcanon for me now. That's like 100%.
Yeah, it's much neater.
So much neater. And works a lot.
I like the notion, I way prefer the notion that they weren't technically under that water for too long.
Yes.
Because that's the problem for me, the big problem with the months passing theory, where you couldn't have done the underwater thing because the bodies wouldn't have survived. That's just
correct.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And yeah, it brings up all sorts of questions about the parents and the logic of, because you could kind of, you could make an argument that really their parents should be there. At the hospital, there would have been time. I understand the kids maybe finding them and calling an ambulance and da-da-da-da-da, but yeah, you'd think by the time they woke up, the parents would be there, or certainly that the hospital wouldn't have gone, "Oh yeah, they're waking up after this really horrendous thing. Yep, you all go in your Halloween costumes and wait. Yep, that's just what they're going to need when they wake up." So yeah, it's already stretching that a little bit. Yeah. That first notion would have just stretched it way too far for me.
Yeah, but thankfully, I think it was kind of like an early idea, and I think that's okay. So, let's talk a little bit about the sort of after they're out of the woods stuff. Well, first of all, I suppose we quickly hit the song. So there's a song that plays while they're in the hospital, not in the hospital, sorry, in the ambulance. And the lyrics are: 1 is a bird, 2 are the trees, 3 is the wind in the leaves, 4 are the stars, 5 with the moon, smiling up down upon thee. And then it carries on in a vinyl release they did, but not in the show. But it's 6 are the fish, 7 are the reeds, brushing the soft bellied breeze. 8 are the roots firm in the ground. Deep is my love for thee. Deep is my love for thee. Even. I don't know what we can glean from that one. That one seems a bit more...
Well, it seems to be referencing, Beatrice, the fish, the trees. It just seems to be referencing stuff from the show.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the imagery is bird, the trees, the wind in the leaves, the stars, the moon. These are all things we could see in the woods, I suppose. The fish, the reeds. Yeah, I guess you're right. So it's just more of a list of shit we saw. Cool.
That's the working title of the song.
What's interesting though is that is a song. That song is sung by Shirley Jones, who is actually Beatrice's. Yes. You got it. You got me. You did it. Has that been the game all along? You keep saying it wrong until you get me to say it wrong one more time.
No. Please don't think there's any thought beyond annoying you.
Yeah. Well, it's working. Beatrice's mother, coupled with the final line of the song, it could be deduced that Beatrice's mother sang this song to her, maybe. So yeah, I think that's
yeah.
Especially because it ends with "Deep is my love for thee." It's nice.
Maybe, although if I'd been turned into a donkey and then got unturned into a donkey, I wouldn't be like, 1 is the garden, 2 is the donkey, 3 is the trees. I'd be like, 1 is the garden, 2 is the donkey. Yeah, you remember when you got us turned into fucking donkeys?
Yeah.
Jesus, Patrice. So, but yeah, that's a nice notion still.
Yes.
To be fair, they seem fairly casual about the whole thing anyway, to be fair. Remember when you turned us into birds?
Yeah, I guess after a certain amount of time, if it's all worked out in the end, it's kind of like, I suppose you could laugh at that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to very briefly talk about the name for the frog, Jason Funderburker, because what I think's really nice is in the previous episode, Greg asks Wirt to help him name him. And he doesn't. He's no, I'm not interested in that. What? No, sort it out yourself. Choose a name yourself. Then the show continues with Greg choosing name after name after name, not settling on any of them. The second Wirt chooses a name for the frog, Greg decides that's the perfect name for a frog.
Oh yeah, it's very sweet.
And I think he was just waiting for Wirt to help all along.
Ugh, in so many ways. It's so beautifully written.
Isn't that great? Like, I only got that on this rewatch, but I was just like, that's actually perfect. Like, I love how sweet that is.
And obviously the great gag of, like, the real Jason Thunderberger being like, huh?
You mean me? No, I mean the frog. Like, it's great. That's a really good gag.
And obviously, it's my frog. Our frog. Our frog.
Yeah. No, our frog. Yeah.
While we're on a hospital scene, obviously, Dan, Sarah's not got a tape player. So do you think they are more
modern,
closer to the modern day than realised?
See, when I first heard that line back in my probably my original watch, I think I drew that conclusion. But having rewatched it multiple times since then, everything from the weird boxy cars to the horrible wallpaper in the house at the party, it's all screaming 70s, 80s, or very early 90s at the latest between them. Nothing beyond that. So I think the furthest you could push it is early 90s, when I guess cassette players were less prevalent, but not like no one had them. Do you know what I mean? That's my assumption. Because everything else is pointing to further back in the past. Like I said, from specifically the design of the cars struck me the most, the police car particularly. It's very old and boxy. Yeah, I think, and like I said, when they're in the house, like, the design of the house, like, it's all very sort of, I mean, almost 70s, some of those stuff, like the wallpaper of the house and that. So for me, I still think it's further back in the past, but I would absolutely understand somebody suggesting that it was more modern as a result of that.
You think she just can't afford a tape player or something?
What's that, sorry?
You think she just can't afford like a tape player, or?
Yeah, or she just doesn't listen to a lot of music, so she doesn't have one. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it is, like I said, 90s, where they're becoming a little bit less prevalent.
Yeah, and Wirt is clinging on to his life before his new dad and brother by clinging dear to the things he used at the time before then.
Yeah.
Hashtag deep.
Hashtag Chris thinks he's deep.
To be fair, I think I was probably someone who clung on to tapes a bit. It's crazy. Like the cassette tape revival and the VHS tape revival is nuts to me. But anyway,
it's true. This is true,
especially the VHS one, where it is categorically not a good way to watch films.
Yeah, no, it's horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Do you like the idea that, by the way, we never mentioned this, but do you like the idea that to get out of the unknown, he just had to he had to just decide that he was going to face his life and face his choices?
I don't know if
because they don't do anything to get out. He just decides, I'm going back to face my problems, and Beatrice is the same. You know, she's going back to face her family finally.
But do you think it is that? I just sort of viewed it as he feels confident. I suppose it's the same thing, but like it was for me more about him loving Greg and deciding to look after Greg, and he goes back essentially to rescue Greg.
Yeah,
they don't both immediately wake up. He opens his eyes, he reaches out, he goes down, he saves his brother, and he pulls him back. I viewed it almost as this is about saving Greg now. But because I suppose he doesn't explicitly say, I've got to face up to Sarah. But do you think there's an element of, because he's so confident and like he does the lamp thing and he's quite he's running against the weather? Do you think he's just like a confident guy now and is just like, right, boom?
Well, I was just looking at the last lines before he went. That's where it came from, that idea, because he says, "Here, woodsman, I've got my own problems to take care of. This one's yours. My brother and I are going home. So to me, it was like, I've got course correction to do here. I have been cowardly, and I've been blaming my brother. I need to get back to my life so I can make better decisions. You know.
See, I viewed that as the problem being the tree taking over Greg and stuff. But so maybe I viewed that more literally than you. So yeah, I like your interpretation.
Because there's no problem then after that. He just goes home. So like for him to say I've got my own problems to take care of suggests there's still an issue, but there isn't, is there? He just goes home after that. There's no more conflict there. There's no more. So to me, I've got my own problems to take care of is about facing up to his life and his decisions, and accepting that and going with that is how he gets out. Because the other irony of this whole thing, of course, is that they end up in audible distance from the old grist mill, which is literally where they started. So after 10 episodes of travelling, enough time for the season in the unknown to actually change, they have ended up within like shouting distance of the grist mill, which is literally where they were in the first episode. So yeah, so they've
it's about them as people, Dan, and how they've grown.
I agreed, which is why I feel like he says I've got my own problems to deal with, and then they just show up home, like they return to their sort of conscious bodies. That's how I perceived it anyway. I don't know if anyone has any different theories. Of course, any theories at all or anything you want to tell us we've got wrong, you can stick it down in the comments. Did you like that Greg's hair was all super neat?
What, when they went back?
Yeah.
Yeah. That did make me laugh. I just thought that whole scene was so sweet. Like, the connection between the two of them, the fact that he's like, "Where's Greg?" is the first question he asks and stuff. Yeah.
I also like that the frog, Jason Funderburker, is wearing the hat from Sarah's costume.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Again, I mean, what kind of hospital is this?
Well, what kind of ambulance is that? They've been very nice to just let the frog lie on one of the gurneys. What? What? It's a frog. You're a medical institution. That frog came from
way more questions
from the
about.
river.
I got way more questions about the real world here than I do the unknown.
I mean, I've got questions about the ambulance people. Oh yeah, well, let them keep their pet frog that they found in the river. That's definitely not.
No, but even the hospital didn't take it away from him.
They've even put a little blanket over the frog.
Yeah.
Madness. Did you notice that Jason Funderburker was holding hands with the bird girl who clearly liked him in the previous episode?
I didn't notice that. That's cool.
So in the previous episode, the girl in the bird outfit, when Sarah was like, "You can stop holding my hand now," she was like, "You can hold my hand, Jason Funderburker." Like it was very like,
oh yeah,
sweet and awkward. Well, in this, if you look at the shots of them together, or the shots in the hospital, in every one of them, he's holding her hand.
Oh, that's sweet.
I think that is sweet. And the thing is about the Jason Funderburker thing, this whole, like, we make jokes about, he's the complete package. That's hilarious because he's just this weird sort of guy. But, like, I think to Wirt, he is the complete package because I think he's everything Wirt wants to be. I think he's confident. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, I think it's one of those things that starts as a joke, but in reality is actually something quite a strong statement about Wirt's state of mind.
Yeah, he's so for he goes for it basically. He thinks he wants Sarah, so he really goes for Sarah in those early, in the last episode and stuff.
Yeah, agreed. Did you like that there was a moment of almost reverting back to form with the tape that he fights? So straight away he goes, "We'll listen to the tape together," and then he goes, "Maybe we'll listen to some of the stuff first, and we'll build towards the tape." And then, like, he goes back on that and goes, "Oh, we could listen to the tape." Like, he almost had, like, a moment of where he regressed, but then he fought it. I think...
I thought that was more... I think I just viewed that more as a gag. I found that funny. I think, like you say, it reverses in the end. And also, like, just because he's got, I think... getting the confidence to speak to her and tell her and ask her out essentially is one thing, and getting the confidence to go, "Here's this strange tape I made you with clarinet" is another.
Clarinet and poetry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the ending tags. There's several of them, and what I love is the narrator, who we haven't heard since the first episode, who blatantly is Jason Thunderberg the Frog, says, "Now the story is complete and everyone is satisfied with the ending, and yet, over the garden wall." And I love that because, first of all, it's a joke. The story's complete and you're all satisfied with everything. Like, it's almost a knowing nod to the people who might be like, "Give me the answers," what exactly is the unknown? It's called the unknown. It's the clue is in the name, but it's almost like a wink to the idea that not everybody might be satisfied with this ending. But then it goes into say, and yet over the garden wall, and then we get a series of tags related to other characters. The fish that was fishing finally catches something. One of the black turtles. I don't have much to say about that other than he looks very happy with his catch, and I'm happy for him.
Yeah. Pleased for the fish.
Yeah, we see Lorna living happy with Auntie Whispers. She's reading a book that is very cleverly called Tome of the Unknown, which is the title of the pilot, which we'll get your thoughts on in a little bit, Chris. I'd like to get you, because I'll be completely honest here. I've not seen that, so I would be curious to find out what that's like.
Oh, you've not watched it at all?
No, I've never. Because you know what, I thought about watching it for this, and I thought, no, we could maybe that's something we can do later on if anybody wants us to. But so I've still haven't seen it, but I like that you've seen it, so we can do a small review of it here. The frog, still a frog coming out of the mud. There's those frogs from the Lullabies in Frog-Lang episode are still hibernating, which is nice. Coming for a little bit there, then went back down. Lady Grey looking at a photo of Quincy with Fred, which I think is cool. Then we see the shelf that the toy maker had from the earlier, from the intro of the very first episode. But now he's added three more toys actually. He's done Greg, Wirt, and Jason the Frog. I think that's nice. The folks from Schooltown Follies are now visiting the circus that once the guy was trapped at as a gorilla as part of the act. I thought that was weird they chose to go see that, but fine. The lantern seems to have found its way to Pottsfield. It's at the Enoch's feet. We see Enoch actually as a black cat, which ironically in the very first episode we see a black cat moving around pumpkins in a cart. That's clearly Enoch preparing for the Harvest Festival from the very second episode. Now we know that Enoch is a cat. There's also, actually, to step out of that, another note I've made is that if you watch the Harvest Festival episode of The Hard Times at the Huskin Bee, when they first get into the barn where all the pumpkin people are dancing, two of them are dancing with a black cat, and then it cuts away, and then a few shots later it cuts back, the black cat has vanished, and then a few shots after that, the big giant pumpkin starts to move, so they clearly illustrate that there's a black cat controlling that giant thing.
Yeah. The cat is gone and to do that.
It's pretty cool. And then we get to one of my absolute favorites, which is Beatrice's family lived in the old grist mill. The old grist mill is their home, and that's why their dog is the monster in the first episode. It all comes together, but in like 8 different pieces. So in the very intro to the show, which I asked Chris to rewatch before we did this, you see human Beatrice with the dog, the brown and white dog from the first episode. That at them, no, they're not at the mill. They're just in a meadow, aren't they? And then you see a bluebird fly from the back. Now, in the past, I've posited the theory that maybe it was Adelaide that she pissed off originally, but I'm going back to the original story. I don't think she was lying anymore. I think she did throw a rock at a bluebird, because you can see the bluebird in the background of that shot flying through, and then you see her looking a bit grumpy, and you can imagine maybe she's pissed off and she's about to throw a rock. So I think that is very much what happened. I think directly. But what's cool about that is that means that's the reason the dog was hanging around the old grist mill, because the old grist mill was Beatrice's family home. That was her family dog. He was there, and that's when he ate one of the turtles. Well, ate the sweets, but eventually ended up eating the sweet that was actually attached to one of those turtles, and it turned him into that monster from the first episode. And I think that's insane amount of pieces to string together.
It was crazy to me how much was in the opening titles.
Yeah, right? Like, it's all just there. It's completely laid out. The rock facts rock. Beatrice is a human, the woodsman with his daughter. Like, it is literally all there. Auntie Whispers and
Crazy.
Lorna, sorry, with her bag of bones, hole of bones, whatever you want to call it.
So bizarre. It was like, oh wow.
Yeah, that's why it's one of those things where, like, because the other episode you were sort of saying, "Come on, Dan, it's like it's not like this is 2 years down the line. It's only 10 episodes. They could have inserted that stuff." It's still really clever how bold they were to just put this stuff up front.
Yeah, I think that's what surprised me, especially watching the closing montage and the opening credits close to each other.
Yes,
it's almost the same thing.
Yes. Yeah,
It's just a really bold move.
Yeah, it's really bold, 100%. So, what do we think of the scene with Beatrice and her family before we get on to sort of like some of the other bits?
I thought it was fun. I thought it was quite cutesy. Just the banter. I like the fact that I could see potentially some people being like, "Oh God, well that's a bit like too neatly resolved almost." Like I think I made a joke earlier. Like they're quite relaxed about the whole thing, but really you don't have the time to go into the nuances of it. So clearly establishing that they forgive her is probably a better use of that time.
Yeah. And did you feel satisfied that your theory was accurate?
Well, my eventual theory that the scissors were real. You mean?
Yes.
Yeah. No. That was cool. I mean, my original thing was like, I think I outrightly was just like bullshit.
Yes, you are.
It was. I'm just glad they're safe, Dan.
Cool. So there you go. So I think that was everything from the episode.
Although
so
I do want to know who clipped the first set of wings, because obviously the birds don't have the thumbs. So
that's fair. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And actually,
Greg fucked off. So
well, actually, on the note of the old grist mill being theirs, there were apparently a ton of hints that the old grist mill used to be theirs. Apparently, there are bluebird statues everywhere, like they're just into bluebirds. And there's a sack of potatoes that's a brand that has bluebirds on it, which is actually based on a real life brand. But that's all in the first episode. All these hints that they used to live there. It's mad. Anyway, so I've got a bunch of notes still to get through, but we'll do those quicker, like trivia. And I think we've hit on a bunch of them, so I'm probably going to delete a bunch as we go. That I'll be like, oh, we've already talked about that. But in terms of, let's talk about Tome of the Unknown. Let's hit that. So what's the vague story of that? How related is it to the final product? Like what's the deal with that?
Well, it starts with Patrice, Wirt, and Greg.
They're already together.
Walking. Yeah, they're already together. They're not seemingly lost. They're looking for the Tome of the Unknown.
Right.
And then they go into a garden and find a car made of watermelon, I think. And there's like
I've seen that still.
Singing mango or singing pumpkin or something.
Right.
And they decide to drive to the city. And then on the way to the city, Greg accidentally crashes the car into a scarecrow, which releases a load of crows, which begin to attack the city, which is full of like singing fruit and stuff. And then Greg eventually scares the crows away again by just incessantly screaming.
Right.
I mean, it's a weird 9 minutes, Dan.
I mean, that is weird. Because, I mean, that's the thing that Cartoon Network was super excited about, that they wanted to turn into a full series.
I mean, it's got a lot of personality, and it's got a lot of the whimsical elements of the show, which is nice.
Right.
It is I saw a comment that was like, this is like an alternative universe over the garden wall, and it very much feels like that. It's like, it's not, there's no hints of the deeper stuff, particularly that I just watched it. I didn't then delve into it. There's no sense of frustration of like, we've got to go home. They're just looking for a book. But it's entertaining. There's a bit where Greg has the car, and he looks at the wheel and he's like, is this cucumber? And Beatrice is just like, eat it. Like, and he goes to like lick the wheel and stuff. Like, it's pretty funny. But yeah, so there's amusing stuff in it, but it's not as deep. And it doesn't really, you can't retcon it either. You can't go, oh, well, maybe this is an alternative adventure, because they're just so, Greg and Wirt are so like happy and content, and we never see Wirt in particular that jolly.
Yes.
It's bizarre in a way, because the show, I suppose how long do you draw out the hints and stuff? But the core concept, the interesting thing about Over the Garden Wall, and I suppose slightly inspired by Tone of the Garden Wall or whatever it's called, is that essentially the concept is endless. They could just keep running into people and stories, and it could have gone 4 years of that. But they chose not to.
Yeah.
And you could also bring it back and just have a different two characters end up in that world and interact with either the same people again. You know, all it would take is another beast coming along for there to be some shit going down.
Yeah.
But I prefer it this way.
Yeah, me too. Very much so. That sounds interesting, but I sort of you hit on a kind of one of the reasons I've never really previously been too fussed about seeing it was that I always got the impression that it was very different to what we got, and I kind of liked what we got.
In execution, it's tonally, visually. I suppose visually it's a little bit lighter, but I don't know if that's because visually the last 2 episodes are so dark and wintry. Yeah. So maybe it just feels, it's not really any lighter than the Schools episode, I suppose. But tonally, visually, the characters. Oh, Beatrice has a different voice actress. That's really weird.
Yes.
But yeah, it's fine. It's 9 minutes. It's worth a watch to complete the set. I'm surprised you haven't seen it. So yeah,
the original voice actor for Beatrice was Natasha Leggero.
Oh, right.
Who's sort of famous comedian. Like the actress they eventually got to do it, I don't know her from anything else, whereas Natasha Leggero is a bit of a name. It's interesting that they didn't end up getting her back for the whole show. Although I think I prefer... Well, I say I prefer, I've not heard the other one, so, but I think I knowing Natasha Leggero's voice from her comedy, I like what we got. But I'd have to hear how she handled it, to be honest with you.
It's a lot sharper than what we got. What we got's a lot gentler. I prefer what we got as well, but 9 episodes versus 1 could just be that.
Yeah. I mean, Natasha Leggero's got like a cynicism to her in her comedy, but I don't know if she'd have brought that to the character or not. But shall we go through some of the remaining notes then?
Yeah.
I'm worried this is going to be rallying off stuff, so please interrupt as much as you'd like to throw your thoughts into these. Greg was based on Pat McHale's son, to some degree.
I can interject there. There's a behind the scenes clip, and there's this really sweet moment where the kid who plays Greg goes, he says something like, and I might be paraphrasing, but he says something like, I play Greg and he's the funny part of the show. I'm like, all right.
Adorable. That's adorable. How old is the kid that plays
very
him?
Sweet. I don't know. I can never work out people's ages.
Okay. That's funny. That's really great. It seems that Mrs. Langtry was being overdramatic when she was talking about Jimmy Brown. She's made it sound like he'd been missing for months, but apparently, if you listen to the full version of the song found on the soundtrack, he was just gone for 3 days. Although she does know it felt like 8. I mean, that's ridiculous, is what that is. Yeah. Apparently, they were originally thinking of doing 18 episodes.
Oh wow.
That was the original plan. I don't know whether they just didn't think they had enough story for 18, or they thought stretching out over 18 might make it a little too thin. I would have liked to have seen the alternate universe where they did 18 episodes of the show.
Yeah, maybe. Although I think there's a reality that the more you do it, the more you risk putting too many answers in, or you couldn't do as much cool stuff and integrated stuff, I think, is what they've managed to do with 10.
It's certainly very focused. And there's not much... I think the only difference you'd get from 18 episodes is maybe more time to explore some of the ideas, rather than... But I don't know if that would actually make the show better, or maybe more bloated. It's an interesting thought.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Apparently, Wirt's character was going to be originally called Walter. Yeah, that's just a thing I'd discovered. Jason Funderburker's design is actually based on show creator Patrick McHale himself. There's a picture of him from, I think, the 80s, I want to say, where he is wearing a hella fresh suit, and it is very much the design inspiration for... I don't have that picture to hand, and I don't think I can necessarily remember to edit it into the video, but if you Google that, it's quite a fun image. It's really good.
was going to say, I saw an interview clip of him, and he didn't look like him at all now, but obviously back in the day he did then.
Yeah, he had a bowl haircut, looked awkward as crap, but he was wearing a fly suit. look, it sounds like I'm mocking. Honestly, I look worse than that now. So what's he's killing it, man. He was killing it. What's interesting
is a complete package.
He's the complete package. He is the complete package. Interestingly, now I said last week that it seemed like Wirt's costume came from maybe a band outfit of some sort in his attic. In reality, I didn't look closely enough. It looked like there was like a trumpet or something on the hat, so that's where I think I assumed it was a band outfit. And I'm sure, and I don't know because it's not been released yet from where we're recording this, but I'm sure there are plenty of comments correcting me. But just so you guys know, I shortly thereafter discovered that actually, if you look closely, it's not a horn as such. It's the symbol of the Union from the American Civil War. And the Union infantry soldiers wore hats like that. So it looks like it was an old Civil War uniform. I couldn't find much evidence that they wore capes quite like his, but there were parts to some of the coats that had a cape-like quality that I think you could maybe detach. So it kind of fits with an old Civil War era outfit.
You went deep into this stuff.
Well, yeah, because I also looked into a theory that there was a theory that it's a World War One nurse's outfit. Now, I did find a World War One nurse's sort of cape that was, and I mean, identical doesn't cover it. Like, it's blue on the outside, red lining. It's very close to what Wirt wears, but the problem is,
right,
he doesn't find that. He finds that jacket with a Union infantry hat from the Civil War. So either someone's just collected random old war memorabilia and shoved them in a box, or more likely, I think it is supposed to be the Union Civil War outfit. I think that fits. But I don't think it's likely to be uniform from two sources because they're the same exact shade of blue. They clearly match. He doesn't end up taking the hat. Obviously, the hat he discards and then makes his own with the Santa hat of sorts. So I think it's a Civil War thing. I think even though it does really spookily match a picture I found of a World War One nurse's outfit.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a Civil War costume. I think it's more likely as well that he would. He's a young kid, in the 80s. I can see him being Civil War more than wanting to be the nurse.
Yeah, 100%.
For the time and stuff.
There's one of the cassettes. So in Wirt's room, and I did freeze frame this when we watched this episode to see if I could find some little details. Missed a couple. There's a poster on the background of Wirt's room. That's for a band called the Black Turtles, which I thought was fun. There's a cassette on his table that appears to say 3 non-blondes instead of 4 non-blondes. So I don't not 100% sure if that's a joke that maybe one of the members of that band left, or if it's an alternate universe where there were only ever 3 non-blondes. I don't know. Thought that was kind of fun.
Oh, right.
I thought that was.
I was going to say that's a band, isn't it? But the band is 4 non-blondes.
Correct.
Is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's a little notion that it's a parallel world.
Yeah, which I think is an interesting idea. My favourite, though, of all the little things in that room that's noteworthy is there's a book on the floor for interior design, which I paid no attention to and I freeze-framed it. But of course, in the episode Mad Love, he talks about how it's the architecture from the Rococo era. Where does he know that from? He read a book on interior design. Which we see in his room. Like, what a great little detail.
Why is he dressing up as Civil War people and reading books on interior design? Like, he's no Thunderbirker, is he?
No, he's definitely not. But I got the impression that he wasn't really dressing up as a Civil, like intentionally as Civil. I think he just liked the cape because if he'd wanted to dress up as a Civil War person, he'd have worn the hat too, right? He'd have worn the hat.
It's such a, and I guess you could go deep into psychology about superheroes or wearing capes and stuff like that, but it's for someone so painfully shy, the cape is a bold
the cape's a bold move.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I get the impression that was his moment of confidence though, like wasn't it? He was like looking in the mirror. He even put a fan there to see the cape swirl in the wind. I think I think when he was leaving that night he felt confident, but I think he lost it instantly. About it, like
when I early in my like working career, the manager I had at the time would constantly talk about, how I had the skills but didn't necessarily have the confidence, and there would be constant talk of wearing a cloak of confidence and imagining I was walking around with a cloak that gave me confidence and stuff. And so I think that is a thing, that is a psychology thing out there.
Yeah.
There was a lot of one-to-ones where cloak of confidence came up, and like recently someone said something and they were like, "Oh yeah, I said I needed to be a bit more confident." And I was like, "They talk about the cloak," and they were like, "Yeah, how'd you know that?" It's like, I had a lot of cloak talks myself.
Amazing. I don't even. Where do I start with that? Well, we'll move on in a second, but I'm very quickly going to ask Chris if I can take a pee break, because I am desperate for a wee, and I think we've still got about 15-20 minutes of stuff to go through here. Is it okay if I take a quick break for a pee?
Yeah, I'll do the same.
Yeah.
I'll nip. I'll nip.
We'll snip. So for listeners,
we'll reconvene.
For listeners, you're going to hear there'll be a beep here as we cut from this moment to the moment after we've relieved ourselves.
Here comes the beep.
We're back. Good. Relieved.
Hey,
I feel relieved.
I feel relieved.
I made a terrible error of basically I woke up, basically drank a pint of water, then made a giant cup of tea, and I've been drinking that the whole time. So between the pint of water and that, there was no way I was getting through this without needing a toilet break. Terrible mistake on my part. I should have done what I'm probably going to have to do for Avengers Endgame and just not drink for like 3 days ahead of the movie.
I can't tell you how much time I've spent thinking about
the
strategic challenges and strategy of that. My thinking is, because I suspect me and Ronnie, because presumably Endgame would have come out by the time this, definitely would have come out by the time this airs. But we're having dinner beforehand, so I think a small single drink with dinner, and then go into the film with a big Coke, but don't really start drinking it until halfway through.
Yep.
I think that's my intent, because no, I don't want to be dehydrated, but I don't want to leave the film.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the strategy most people are going to go with. I think, which is drink ahead of the film, to the point where you need to go before the film.
Yeah.
So then you're hydrated, but you're also that's the way to do it. Anyway, shall we get to?
I can see why they've not put an intermission in it, but it was useful in Hateful Eight.
Yeah, I'll bet. Should we talk about some of the cut plots then? Some of these were cut because they were too dark. Yeah. Some of them they chose not to go with, but I think these are fascinating. This one's mad. They find the house of a man who made dice from the bones of captured children. And the song of the souls of the children were trapped underneath the house, and they would be singing, and the kid Wirt and Greg would hear them, and that's what would tip them off, and they try to escape. Like that is dark.
Yes, it's too dark, Dan. And also, I don't like the idea that sounds such a weird sentence to say, but I don't like the idea that there's a rival being out there after the souls and bodies of children. That
is a really good point. Yeah, he's cutting into the beast's territory.
Yeah, makes the beast less.
The beast's like,
terrifying.
mate, this is my territory. This is my turf. You find your own woods to torment kids in, man. I got my. I mean, this is my spot. This is my corner.
That's the bones came from the inside of the trees, but it's weird.
Yeah. There's another idea of a witch who took her skin off at night to fly around and dance on people while they slept.
That's bizarre.
It's just weird, isn't it? I like the idea that that's the third sister. The third.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
That is nice.
Like, we never saw her, but that's what. Apparently, Pat McHale has said that he's got a massive backstory for Adelaide that he's worked out, but he'll never ever tell anyone what it is, and I don't know why. But he's decided that's secret.
Why would he not tell anyone?
Yeah, I don't know. He's just that for some reason that's private for him. He just doesn't want to reveal that. He thinks I don't know why.
I wondered whether her death or her thing was like being caught in a fire or something, or being, she turns to ashes. I don't know. Anyway,
it's an interesting thought.
yeah.
There was an idea of Wirt accidentally getting caught trying to steal from a lady's house, and she sort of sees them as this charming gentleman burglar, and she's quite infatuated with Wirt. I guess she's into bad boys or something. I'm not really sure, but like the idea being that this lady that whose house Wirt is stealing from, like she ends up being charmed by him rather than appalled when she finds him stealing. It's a funny idea. I don't know.
Of the ones you've named so far, that's the one I'd be the most could slot in, I think.
Yeah, that's a funny idea. I think that is a very funny idea. But like, if you think about all these ideas, you think like, oh, this could have been the plan for the original 18 episodes. Maybe this is where some of these ideas fell by the wayside. This one's great. This is my absolute favorite, if I'm being completely honest with you. They visit a town where everything seems and feels like it's underwater. They can float, and everything's moving around in that wavy sort of waterway, but they're able to talk and breathe just fine. The idea of this is that it completely foreshadows the fact that in the real world, they're currently in water.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
Isn't that brilliant?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are sort of some missing concepts or episodes we didn't get to see. Do you want? There was a point when the very premise of the show was very different. Do you want to hear some of the idea for that?
No.
Okay, well, we'll move on. So some original titles for the...
Go on, obviously I want to hear not bad.
So, it's great. So the original idea is actually, I would like to see, just like as a different show, like I would just watch this as a show. But the idea is that they're on a train, they don't know how they got there, but they get the impression distinctly that it's taking them beyond. Like they're dead, they're dying, and it's taking them beyond. So they escape the train, they jump off it, and then they end up in the unknown, which is the woods. At the end...
that's good.
The beast, by the way, in that version, he's just someone who works on the train. He's following them to try and get them back on the train. He's just doing his job, man. He's just doing his job. But the idea of that one is that they're both, again, like in this one, there's an element of avoiding the real world and choices they made in real life. And in the end, they decide to face their problems and get back on the train, only to find out it wasn't taking them back to death, but taking them back to life.
Oh, that's good.
Isn't that great?
That's a good idea for a film or a TV series in itself.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like that original concept is. I mean, God, Pat McHale is clearly a genius. Like that's a whole other show that I would definitely watch.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's great. No, I think it's a really cool notion, and I love the idea of a different version of the Beast where he's not the Beast at all, but just like some weird train conductor that's like, "I need to get back on the train."
Yeah,
that's
cool.
That's a funny idea to me. Would you like to hear some of the original titles for the show?
Yep.
So originally, there's a lot of them. So Lantern Song, Torch of the Unknown. The one that's maybe most intriguing for what he was thinking of when he first came up with this, Lost in Dreamland.
Ooh.
Yeah, it sort of suggests dreams and stuff, but yeah. Or maybe the idea might have in that one been that they referenced that it felt like Dreamland. They were calling it Dreamland because they assumed they were sleeping because it was so weird, but obviously then they'd find out differently. I don't know what the exact notion of that was, but there you go. The one that makes the least sense to me, Salt Box Stories. I shrug. I don't know what that is.
The salt of the water that they're in, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, let me just. Is Saltbox a thing?
I have no idea.
No, it's a place. I don't know. No, I genuinely don't understand that. Saltbox Stories. The Old Lantern makes sense. The Speckled Hen. I mean, what is he doing? Name it a pub or a TV show? I don't understand.
Speckled Head is particularly bad.
Yeah, that's not a great one. Haunted Dreams, once again hinting at the dream idea.
Yeah.
Don't Go Home, which I suspect might have been a title more related to the train version of the show, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Long Gone. Okay, yeah, sort of dark and suggests they've been missing for a while. Haunted Woods. I mean, that's just very literal. I'm glad he didn't go with that one. Dark Steam Shadows.
That's all right.
Not sure, yeah. And then the one that I think is very much reminiscent of the train notion, which is literally Little Black Train.
Ah, that's nice.
Yeah, I think the train version of the show should have been, if that had existed, of those titles, Little Black Train is my favourite.
Yeah, I love the idea of the train version of the show. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I mean, this is deeper and has more to analyse. That was a bit more ABC and a bit more, explanationary. But yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's the idea in general, like forgetting maybe the execution for a second, like the notion of there being a train that either takes you on or takes you back when you get into a near death situation and you don't know which it is. And if you were to jump off, you would end up in some sort of weird void world with other lost souls that have avoided, because that very much leans into the nearly headless Nick idea from Harry Potter we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That you can let it take you on wherever that is, and that requires bravery and strength, because that's the real unknown. You don't know what's at the end of the line. You can see that forest, you can call it the unknown all you like. But if you go into that, you know exactly what it is. It's a weird between world with other lost souls.
Which is why it feels like a different show.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. But the idea that those lost souls would have been there so long they've made residence there, most of them, and that's dark as well and kind of spooky. But I love it. Yeah, really cool. So apparently
let's rip it off. Let's make it.
Yeah, let's make it. Yeah, right. Episode 1. Let's go. Let's pitch story ideas. Get them on the board. Let's break story episode 1. For little.
That's a great movie though, as well. I think because it's so.
It feels more compact
so
than the show we got.
But would you start with them dying or getting into an accident, and then suddenly they're on a train, and that's why they get the sense they're going into the unknown? Or would you? Do you know what I mean?
That's a good point. I don't know. Yeah, not sure how you would. No, you would start with them. You would start them on the train, and you would have weird shit happen on the train that scares them off it.
Yeah,
because then it's a bit more mysterious, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So apparently, the eventual name they settled on for the show, Over the Garden Wall, was actually taken from a lost silent film starring Bessie Love. I don't know much about that film, but apparently it's lost to the ages, and the title of it clearly piqued the interest of. Patrick McNeil. Now, this one's really interesting, I think. The moon in the sky was designed to match its appearance on the night the show aired on November 3rd, 2014.
Oh, wow.
So they looked at the moon cycle and drew the moon to match what it would be that night.
Jeez, that's some attention to detail.
Yes, it is. What's really cool is you'll notice that it's all tilted at an angle in the unknown, in a way that the moon would never be, because the movement of the sun, you would never see it facing that way. The idea of that apparently is that it was that it's because, or some have suggested at least, that the idea of that is because once they're underwater, they're not upright, so they're viewing it tilted in the water. So that's how it appears in the unknown.
Jesus, could you bear with me just 1 second? I need to nip out the room for like 30 seconds. Is that all right?
Sure.
Cool. I apologise. Fill for me.
What? I don't know what's happening. What's going on? He's gone. I'm just on my own. This is weird.
I do humbly apologise and hope I can be forgiven.
What's going on?
Oh, I heard Jess was leaving the house and I needed to ask her something that I didn't think I needed to ask her.
Okay.
What?
Just do texts not work? I don't know why you had to... Can you not text her? I don't understand.
I didn't think of texting her.
Fair enough. Okay.
I thought I'd just interrupt our morning instead, Dan. I apologise.
Great. Cool. What were we even talking about? So the moon. So it's at an angle in the unknown because they would have been looking at it from an angle tilted underwater.
That's phenomenal. Like, that... I've never heard of attention to detail quite like that before.
Yeah, it is insane. I don't know 100%, like... that's one of those things that's like, they've never actually... They definitely, I think, talked about planning it so the moon would be... where it was on the night that it aired. The idea of it being tilted, I think that's conjecture from fans, but it is definitely tilted in the unknown, and you could look at that one or two ways. You could say the creators just wanted to tilt the moon slightly to an unnatural position to indicate they're not quite in the normal real world, or you could look at it as the creators were seeing the physicality of they're underwater at an angle, so they'd see the moon that way, therefore in the unknown it should appear that way. Either way, it's still really cool. It's a nice detail.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So apparently so these are the last couple aren't like as deep or like overall showy as those ones, which is annoying because I wish I'd reordered these slightly because these last ones are just like little tiny ones, but there's only a couple more. Beatrice
That's how you're going to end our podcast, Dan. Some tiny inconsequential trivia. Fine, go for it.
Yeah, it does feel like the way we normally end these things. Beatrice's
Says
theme...
how much this has meant to you.
No, I've had a blast, Chris. I'm loving it. I'm having a good time.
Okay, good.
Yeah. When they first reached the Old Grist Mill, foreshadowing that Beatrice's family owned it, the Beatrice's musical theme plays when they first arrive.
That's pretty cool.
It is cool, and I think what's interesting about that is obviously like they did that in confidence because obviously having not properly met Beatrice yet. You could argue that's like there's no chance of you picking that up and going, you know what I mean? It's surprisingly subtle, and it's worth noting that in the first episode, the woodsman does actually say, "I found this homestead abandoned." So clearly, they abandoned it after having been turned to bluebirds. That's probably too much space when you're a bluebird, and doors are probably an issue. You know. Also, actual bluebirds do that thing that we found in the episode where they gather in the bark of a tree to keep warm together with their own bodies. So that's a nice little touch. The tavern in the Dark Lantern, it's called DL. In the episode Songs from the Dark Lantern, the bar's called DL. Probably stands for Dark Lantern.
Oh, shit.
So Songs or Tales from the Dark Lantern, or whatever that episode is called, isn't a reference actually to the lantern, but as a reference to the tavern in which they spend the majority of the episode.
Cool. Nice note.
Also in that episode, Greg says, in reference to Wirt, when they're trying to figure out who and what he is, in terms of his position in the world, Greg apparently says, he helped me find this frog, which is accurate, we find out in a later episode. He literally helped him find the frog, because he was still under the impression he took him to the graveyard to find a frog.
Yeah.
Adelaide's desire for a child servant is most likely out of jealousy for her sister's slave, Lorna. We never talked about that.
Oh, nice notion.
Yeah. Lorna's got... Auntie Whispers has a child to sweep the floors and clean everything. Obviously, Auntie Whispers is doing it for nobler reasons, trying to keep her from killing people. But Adelaide just was like, she's figured it out. She's got a little slave to clean things and prepare things for her. I need the same. There's also a note. There's a moment earlier in an earlier episode where Beatrice is like, we don't need. I think she says to Greg, we don't need work. You come with me, or the other way around. I can't remember. No, she says to Greg because of course Adelaide only wants one kid, so it wouldn't have mattered to Beatrice at that point.
So she's trying to protect the other one. Yeah.
Apparently, according to the comics, they did a few little sort of spin-offy comics. The Woodsman's daughter is called Anna.
Nice.
Not a little detail, just not so you know the name. But the one I quite liked, so it actually corrects a theory I posited in a previous episode. So we talked about Fred the horse. This is the last one, by the way. We talked about Fred the horse and the theory that he had stolen and been turned into a horse. And that's why he knew where Adelaide was. Maybe he'd stolen from Adelaide and she'd turned him into a horse, blah, blah, blah. It's a little bit different from that, I think, now, having read this. But apparently highwayman is an old term for a travelling burglar, hence his sort of mask. And he literally says in his song, I'll knock you out, steal your shoes off your feet, I'm the highwayman, gotta make ends meet. So the alternate theory is that Fred loves stealing because he belonged to the highwayman.
Oh, also cool.
The irony bit of which being, of course, that they steal his horse.
Yeah.
which is just fantastic. And apparently that's been somewhat confirmed in the comics. I don't know to what extent, but apparently one of the comics has dealt with the Highwayman and Fred the horse having a previously existing relationship. I don't know if I take the comics necessarily as canon, but there you go. There's one other thing I wanted to just mention, which is the turtles, the black turtles. They've shown up multiple times. Auntie Whispers was eating them. They're found on the Edelwood trees. That the dog eats one in one of the first episodes and turns into a monster. Obviously, Wirt likes the band the Black Turtles. Like, there's black turtles are everywhere for some reason. Apparently, on Twitter, they asked the creator of the show, what's with the black turtles? Reasonable question, I think. And his response was 5 words. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Chris. An imperfection in the quilt.
Is it? An imperfection in the quilt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it means it's a mistake. They were going to do something with them and then didn't. Dreams? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think maybe what he's essentially saying, my theory on what he's essentially saying is that they're kind of like something wrong with it. They're an imperfection in the fabric of reality almost. They cause things to act differently. Like the dog eats one and turns into a monster. They're like sort of, imagine, you remember that in that Doctor Who episode Father's Day, those beasts that were just, those monsters that were just eating things that were wrong with time. You know, they were like sort of almost like bacteria, you know, in the fabric of time and space that come to correct when there's issues. I don't know, maybe the turtles are something like that for the unknown, you know, cleaning up the inconsistencies, you know, somehow. I don't know. Thought it was interesting.
Maybe. That's very interesting, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't think of much else other than that, but it's but I mean, yeah, maybe they just represent imperfections in the unknown physically, you know.
Yeah, I suppose they're the most sort of background. We never get the detail.
Yeah, and there is a consistency. There's a consistency to them showing up. They're not like completely random. Like they repeatedly show up. It feels like more of an aesthetic choice almost. I wish we'd had more to say on that, but it's so vague. An imperfection in the quilt.
Yeah, that's really, because like I say, it just makes me think about the dream thing again. But I don't think that's it. I don't know.
There you go. So I think that's it. I mean,
there we go.
I did. That was a marathon of getting through all that triv at the end. Sorry if I just if that was just too much of me talking for listeners at the end there, going through all that triv.
But it's triv, Dan. That's what the triv is. Calm down. Cool your beans. I repeat. Cool your beans.
Okay. You feel it, right?
Yeah. I'm just why are you panicking? Like, the triv section is you literally reading trivia, and now you're like, oh yeah, that was a lot of me reading. Like, yeah,
but like there was more of it than usual, so it was a higher percentage of the episode's runtime than usual because there was a lot.
I think trivia was only about 15 minutes by the time you take out me disappearing and you wanting a pee. It's fine.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It felt more like 20, 30 minutes, but anyway. Yeah. So I mean. Absurd amounts of research aside, how are you feeling then? Not just about the show, but like about this experience in general. Where are you at?
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's been I think we had hiatus for so long for Steven Universe, and it's so invested in Steven Universe. It was odd to learn some other world new from scratch. It can be, I think that it's been not surprising, but crazy that, 11-minute episodes, hour-long episodes of this, but give the people what they want. Does make me worry about ever doing Avatar or Adventure Time because, what a commitment.
Yeah, well, Avatar's 60 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, it's 60 hours. It's a fair commitment, Dan.
Yeah, you got me there. Funnily enough, I rewatched Avatar recently, and I actually don't think that it's as much to. We'd probably still spend an hour each episode, wouldn't we? I can't say we wouldn't. That'd be a lie,
exactly.
wouldn't it?
Yeah. We could try and stop ourselves, but that wouldn't happen. So yeah, it's been great. I think the show's been brilliant. I think my biggest moment, the thing I remember, was just this being so impressed about the tragedy of Wirt's character last week. I think that's crazy, and the true strength of the show, as interesting as the otherworldly stuff is, and as interesting as the what's going on is. I think at its core, Wirt's character is a huge standout in writing, in not just this show, but kind of all the shows that I've watched. I thought it was. I've had a good time, and listening to you, Patrice, and winding you up, from it on a personal level. I think it's weird because it's obviously this is only the second time we've ever finished a podcast, and there's less of a, there are 100 episodes of Fringe, whereas this has only been 10. But it always does feel a bit weird to end a podcast. But, we must venture into the known, I guess, Dan.
Amazing. Yeah, I think, I've had a lot of fun too. I think it's been nice I've had a lot of fun rewatching it. I've had a lot of fun being on your journey through the show and like getting your opinions as we've gone. Like, I think it's been nice to see you fall in love with it too, because when you start something like this and you're essentially sharing a thing you love with someone else, you sort of like, there's always that element of, God, what if they hate it? Like, what if I'm about to feel very stupid because there's this thing I love that I think this person might like? I wouldn't be suggesting it if I didn't think they'd be into it too. What if we end up in this in the alternate, darker timeline where you're just like, you hate it every minute of it, and it's just 10 episodes of you ranting. That would be fun for the listeners, but it would hurt me. That'd be my soul in pieces. I'd be quite sad to think that was the case. So I was really glad you got on board, and I got a lot out of finally sort of confirming my theory that once you sort of open your mind to a show like this, it's easier to then experience another one, because I've held that theory for a while, because I fell in love with Steven Universe easier than I think I would have otherwise, because I'd been through a weird experience with Adventure Time where I'd gotten frustrated with it, given up, then gone back to it, and I learned to trust the writers. In Adventure Time, you could argue that trust maybe was wasted. Adventure Time's got some wobbly storytelling, that's all I'm saying, ultimately. But, it meant that when I got to Steven Universe, I was much more prepared to trust and let the writers take me where they needed to take me and go along with it and just accept that I won't know everything straight away, which was a hard lesson to learn. And it was interesting seeing you learn that lesson, not from Adventure Time, but Steven Universe, and then come here to this and apply that same logic. Like in the first episode, you were saying things like, no, I'm going to just stick with it. I trust that this is going somewhere. I was looking out for hints. Like, you didn't take it at face value as a silly cartoon about two boys in the woods going on adventures. You were immediately looking for, where's the depth, where's the character stuff, and you found it really quickly. And I was really proud, because it was just like, it was validating, because it was just like, that's been my held theory for a long time. So seeing you get on board with the show in that way, I think really helped sort of confirm that theory for me. And then just, seeing you enjoy it, like, and talk about the things you loved, particularly like you said last week, you talking about Wirt and his character and how much you got out of that. And I think got a character that far along in 10 episodes is kind of remarkable. And like, everyone who worked on the show is clearly a genius. Like, everything from the art direction to the storytelling and the creativity and the thematic sort of approach, and like the way that they used a lot of older styles of stuff, but it didn't ever feel old. It just felt it felt like it had a tone and atmosphere of old onto itself. But a lot of it was just that they were borrowing, like, in a totally fun way, all these like older notions and it just proves that, like, it doesn't. Old stuff isn't immediately binnable. Do you know what I mean? Oh, it's old. I can't use that anymore. No, they've referenced cartoons from the 20s and 30s, and the story itself is ripped straight out of like a fucking like Hansel and Gretel style, like sort of Brothers Grimm, like
Yeah.
so, but it's completely modernized and repackaged and still worked perfectly well in a modern aesthetic. So, I just appreciate the way this show is sort of proves that there's no such thing as any of this stuff being like any of these storytelling techniques being too old, and I think it's also just like a lot of great comedy and again a lot of really interesting characters, and again I love the use of mystery and the way they make it all that it doesn't need to be answered and you don't even care by the end.
No, it's such a wonderfully complete show,
which in theory I could absolutely see somebody finishing it and feeling very, very, very opposite to that and feeling frustrated and like they didn't have all the answers. But
they haven't analysed it for 10 hours, have they, Dan?
No, 12. No, 11. Where are we at? We're at 11 hours. No, they haven't, Chris. So I think it's been a really great experience and I'm really glad I got to rewatch it. It's been fun to sort of go back.
It's been fun. It's weird because like by the end of Fringe, we knew the audience, and we've only put up 5 episodes.
Yes, 4 episodes.
4 episodes from the point of view of recording. So it's fun to see. Obviously, I've been avoiding it because of spoilers, but it was fun to see a bit of the comments and stuff, and people seem to be enjoying it. So thank you for anyone that listens to the others and has listened to this, and anyone that's sort of checked us out because of this. Feel free to check out Steven University or Nothing But Static or even Fringe Observers, which is still on iTunes, which is us doing this but with Fringe,
the TV show Fringe. Yeah, so I think as well, like anyone who's like, because we've clearly gained a fair few subscribers from this because we tipped over into the 1,000 mark while doing this show. So we gained at least sort of 30-40 subscribers out of this. So to those of you who subscribed, thank you. Stick with us. There's more stuff coming. Steven Universe and Only I Shouldn't the Kids related at the very least. So obviously massive thank you as well to Fretzel who provided the music that we used at the top and tail of all 10 episodes of this. It's a brilliant interpretation of that theme, and you can listen to the full version of it. There's an extended version of it on Fretzel's channel, which if you just YouTube Fretzel, but I think it's youtube.com/c/Fretzel. Fretzel spelled Fretzl. Fretzel, yeah. Definitely go check out. There's also a link in the description for every episode, so you can find it that way. You can catch us on Twitter. I'm at Dan Doolan. Chris is at C Billingham. We're at Nothing But Static without the G if you want to just catch the channel's general Twitter feed, although we check that less and update that less. If I'm being honest, my own personal Twitter feed gets more updates than that one does, and I need to work on that, but there you go. You can also join the Discord if you wish by asking for an invite from me, or you can go to the Patreon and become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $1 a month. That will send you an invite link. I suppose you could do that and then immediately cancel the Patreon.
Well, don't give them ideas.
Yeah. Pay what you can afford. If $1 is as much as you're willing to give,
fair.
Do it.
No, I mean don't give them ideas to do that just for the Discord link and then leave.
Yeah, do that then. If you can only afford $1,
fair enough. Fair point.
And you don't want to pay it monthly. That's fine. We'll try and do more early release stuff on the Discord as the year goes on, or maybe exclusive stuff. We might bring Pointless Noises back. That died for a weird reason. For a really weird reason. We did one on books. And then we were sponsored by Audible, and I felt dirty putting it up because it felt like we were sending the people who give us money, the patrons, an ad, and I didn't, and that felt really dirty, and that's why that one never went up, and therefore, and I was waiting, and then I've still got it. I could put it up now, and it wouldn't feel as dirty because we've not had Audible sponsorship for a little while. But that's the reason it didn't go up.
We reference Audible sponsoring it throughout, though, don't we? Even I think.
We made it, because they didn't sponsor us at the time. We were making jokes about it, and then it actually happened.
Right.
Like, we were making a joke, like, go get Audible, and it just, like, felt really dirty and filthy, and that's why it never went up, and then we never did any more, because that one was just sitting there. It's like, wow, do we record another one? And for those who don't know, Pointless Noises was just sort of a tangent-y podcast, intentional. It was just for our Patreon subscribers. So maybe we'll go back to that. That's a nice idea. We should still do that every now and then. But anyway, thanks
we might do things. We could do things where we could potentially. We're not definitely going to do this, but an option is that we might, if the podcast is. I don't know. We tend to record. No, I was thinking of chopping out a bit of the podcast and putting it up early, but we tend to record nothing but static pretty close to when it goes out these days. So
yes,
forget that. I'm just rambling.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, thanks very much for listening. You're the best if you've gotten this far. Feel free to comment below, like, subscribe, give us a review on iTunes, share on Reddit, whatever you want to do. You tell people that we do stuff, and then they'll find our stuff, and then they hopefully will hear this and do the same, and then we have listeners. That's how that works. Yeah. There you go. Science.
That makes sense. Logical.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks very much for listening, everyone.
Thank you.
You are genuinely, you're the best. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for those that have joined us as we ventured into the unknown.
And now we will leave it there and say that thanks very much for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And join us next time when we venture into the known of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. God damn it. What have we done?
Just for clarification, for those that... Because I don't think Dan sounds excited enough. Monday, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Tuesday, Honey, We Blew Up the Baby. Or Honey, I Blew Up the Baby.
Blew Up the Kid, I think it is.
Wednesday, Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves. Thursday, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV series. Available on Prime for £30. And Friday, YouTube footage of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the ride.
I just don't know where to start.
I'm excited.
Oh, I know you are. Oh, God.
I'm very excited. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids aired on Sky this week. It's amazing. I get to watch that one on the big TV, and yeah.
It's destiny, Chris. So
I did see on Amazon. I was like, Amazon Prime genuinely has the TV show, and I was like, ooh. And Jess was like, "What's the? Don't buy it." And I'm like, "But it'd be shiny, great quality." She's like, "No,
it won't be. It won't be. They won't have spent any money restoring it. It'll just be the same." Anyway, well, yeah. So thanks for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham,
and come back next week for that insanity.